So welcome everybody. My name is Phil Rose. I have been coaching and consulting for 15 or so years, and the prime area I coach in is around helping people engage in their business through connecting to them to their purpose. And purpose is a bit of an overused word in some camps at the moment, but my belief it's the only way to get people really to buy into what you do. And I talk to a lot of people about this, and I talk to them about it outside of their business as well, because actually we all have to have a clarity around who we are and what we do and why we do it, I believe, to really engage ourselves. But from a business perspective, one of the key things I notice is that those businesses that are better engaged with their staff are the ones who have a clarity of purpose. I always say above and beyond making money. I see lots of businesses out there which are great at going out there and they say we're going to go and change the world, but actually what they are is just money machines. Because my view is those that get the balance between culture and commercial are the ones that really do best. And I work more on this cultural side, which is actually about engaging employees, making people feel wanted in the business. And my purpose in life is actually just to inspire people to take action, to realize they have choices in what they do. So Lisa and George have joined me today for this conversation. We've had a number of conversations prior to this, just to look at how do we best bring people together around the subject of reducing emotional anxiety. And it was a word that Lisa used when I talked to her a while back, about us all coming back into the workplace, whether we've been furloughed, whether we've been working from home, but there's a need for us to re-enter the workplace in a different way over the next few weeks and months. And there's a lot of anxiety hanging around this in different ways. So we wanted just to really explore that. And the point was that George, Lisa and I would just have a conversation around some areas which we believe can be beneficial for companies to help people bring themselves back into the workplace. Now, for those who don't know George and Lisa, I've just got a note here which they sent me out, and it's quite interesting actually when I read this. Lisa's a chartered psychologist and a psychotherapist, and she believes in the very clarity around getting the people right, help get businesses right first. And what she does is she helps organizations become places where people feel engaged, happy and productive. So it really fits into my line of thinking around engagement of people. George and I have known each other for many years, and we run together occasionally. George goes off and does very silly things, but I haven't done those distances before. But George is a wellbeing and performance coach, a speaker and an author. He's had 20 years working with individuals and organizations to help them take more action to thrive in their lives. And George and I, when we're out running, we often talk about these things, although a lot of the time it's breathing heavily to keep up with the distance that we're doing. George invited me recently to join him on just a simple marathon round the block. It turned out he was running, was it 62 laps? And I only did 31 of them in the end.
63.
63, there we go. But we did half marathon. So maybe if you could do just briefly, I've given you the snapshot, but just explain a bit more about who you are and what you do in that case before we start. George, do you want to go first?
Yeah, well, you pretty much summed it up there, Phil. My interest really is in helping people kind of understand themselves better, understand and manage and control, I guess, more of their thoughts and their emotions, so that they can, as you said, take more action to thrive more in their lives. I'm a big believer that there's probably enough information out there. People kind of know what they should be doing, especially when it comes to physical well-being, but we just don't do it. Yeah. And that's the kind of a classic challenge, a classic issue, and a lot of that is just because we're controlling our behaviors from what's going on up top. So, in the same kind of similar viewpoints to yourself and Lisa, the more we can understand ourselves and the way we talk to ourselves, the better results that we can get and the better experience we have of our lives. So
that's very, very, very true. No, nice bit, and I think that's a good segue into some of the things that Lisa does as well as a psychologist. So Lisa, just to expand on what I said in that case, maybe about yourself.
Yeah, so I think, well, like both of you said, it's about people being their best, and actually if we look after people and enable people to, George used the word thrive, I talk about that a lot, but that sense of being able to understand themselves, but also understand those people around them and being able to connect well with people around them. And as George said, there's so much information around this, it's not rocket science, but people are overwhelmed with actually how much information there is, I think, and also struggle to put it into place when their own emotional arousal might be higher than perhaps they want it to be, which gets in the way of them being able to implement stuff really well for themselves and for others. So it's about having those sort of strategies at an individual level and organizational level, for people to be able to really engage and be at their best.
Yeah, I think, and that thing about being at your best, I think, is one of the key things, isn't it? You know, we've all spent the last 10 or so weeks working from home, and we've all tried to get on with this. And for some of us, I've worked from home for the last 14 years, but most of my weeks I go out and see people at the time as well. I don't always work in the office 5 days a week. I'm out doing other things, and for me, it's been an interesting thing about how to be at your best. And I've noticed this with a lot of people I work with, where they suddenly had to go and work from home. They've had to get themselves set up. They've had to set up their office equipment. And there was a lot of chatter around that right at the beginning, where people were suddenly getting into that mode of, you know, one day we're working from the office, the next day the government said we're locked down and we've got to be working from home. And there was a lot of excitement in some ways. Oh, we're going to be working from home, a lot of changes. And then this change happened in terms of, well, what's going on for us? How do we set up our equipment? How do we get ourselves into the right place? And many people are talking about going through a change curve or a grief curve in terms of what's happening for them. And we might talk about that a bit later. But one of the things I thought was maybe just us explaining, you know, what happened to us? We've all worked from home before, but just explain a bit about how we adapted and adopted new ways of working. And just explain a bit about some of the emotions we went through. Because I think for me, I've been through a roller coaster of emotions over the last 10 weeks. Mostly positive, because I like to think I'm a mostly positive person, but like anybody, I still have thoughts and I use the word fears for the future. Not specifically for me, but for the people I work with, but also for the younger people coming into the workplace as well, in terms of what's the opportunity for them, what's the differences they're going to have coming about. So I wonder if we just explain a bit about some of our feelings and emotions, and using that word, anxieties, what's been going on for us a bit, if you're happy to do that.
Yeah, should I kick off?
Yeah, go on, Lisa. Yeah.
So I think for me, a big factor for me was having children working at home and doing homeschooling. They're both primary aged. So immediately, I think I went into kind of panic mode about how I'm going to be able to manage everything. And I was very aware that I was suddenly having to try and do my work, which actually increased in volume, and take on extra of doing everything with my children. And one of the things I felt is I could just feel that sense of stress bubbling away, and that sense of anxiety increasing about not being a good enough parent for them, not being able to do my job well enough, how that was going to reflect on me and my business, and all that sort of, you can end up catastrophizing about everything. So when you're all the little imperfections that you normally wouldn't notice, you suddenly start picking up on. And for me, I was thinking, you know, I haven't done something as quickly as I hoped to do something, or I was feeling I was letting people down because I wasn't being on top of everything. And I think for me, with that, part of that was about having to explain really clearly to other people actually what my reality was and how I was feeling about it. And I started with that within my home. So actually saying to my kids and my husband, I'm feeling quite stressed right now, or feeling quite worried about something. This is not a person, this has nothing to do with you guys. This is just to do with me and what I'm trying to deal with right now. And they're very good then at being able to say, oh, that's fine. That's just mummy in this moment, rather than what have I, you know, all that worry of what have I done wrong? You know, why is mummy cross? Why is she stressed, and so on. And I think it's something I talk a lot to other people about. It's just that simple communication of being able to say, I'm having an off day. I'm just not feeling, I'm just feeling tired today, or I'm feeling worried today. I'm feeling, angry today about something in the news, whatever it might be. And it's just being able to let people in to that picture, and then they have an understanding of your perspective. And that's so important because everyone's perspectives are so different.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting thing to say in terms of just getting that clarity around, it's not about them, it's about just how I'm feeling, but being able to explain it and express it in a way that people feel, okay, I'm understanding where Lisa is at this moment, and I can choose to deal with it in different ways, but at least it's not about me, it's about Lisa, and I can look at how I can help her if she needs help or if she wants help at that point in time. But it's the understanding which is the key bit there.
And I always think it like whether I'm in my home or whether I was in a workplace, I can control me and I can let people know what's going on for me. I can't necessarily control everything else that's going on around, but it's almost like a ripple effect. I always kind of think it was like dropping a stone in the water and having the ripples going out. So if I can make a difference by saying, this is what's going on, this is what I can control, in terms of letting people know what's going on and why I'm behaving like I'm behaving, and why I might be a bit snappy or a bit, all the kind of signs of anxiety, then they can deal with that appropriately. But it has a whole knock-on effect with everyone in your vicinity. So if I'm just stressed and angry and snappy and I don't explain it to anyone, everyone else suddenly can start taking on mirroring, using our mirror neurons and starting to mirror that behavior, and suddenly you have a very, very stressful household. So I actually think that ability to be able to take control of what I can take control of has a whole effect on the whole system around us.
Yeah, another thing, take control of what you can take control of. We're going to come back on that in a minute in terms of some of the psychology around this, and you talked about some bits when we were talking previously about this heightened state of anxiety that we're all in, and this just goes to play into that same camp in terms of we can control what we control, but we just got to be acknowledged that's how we're feeling at this point in time.
Yeah.
And Abdul, who's listening at the moment, he just made a comment to me there, saying that one of his points is he's doing work and he's got the kids in the background doing homework. So you've got this balance of children and work, and we're all trying to manage these different pressures at the time. So I think it's something we've just got to be aware of. George, what about you? George, whenever I talk to George, you're always a very positive person. You've got a lot of very useful habits whenever we've talked. Just explain about what's been going on for you over this last 10 weeks in this environment we're in.
Yeah, it's interesting you kind of intro it with that, Phil, because it's almost the curse of being seen as somebody who's very positive, right? And the three of us, that's how we are, it's who we are, it's what we do, we understand this stuff, we coach people, we live our lives every day talking and thinking about positive things, but it doesn't make us immune to those days, Lisa, as you said, that you feel extra stressed, or there's something. It could be nothing. You may not be able to put your finger on what it is, but you still feel that extra sense of frustration. And actually, Lisa, I had a question for you based on some of what you were saying there. You talked very eloquently about how one of your processes and practices for mitigating some of the kind of the negative fallout of these particularly stressful days, is that you just have an open dialogue, you have a conversation, you let people around you know, this is how I'm feeling today. It's not you, it's me. I just need to kind of protect myself a little bit more. Is that something that you have always done, or have you found that you've had to kind of increase the amount that you do that? Has your focus been sharpened to that need during the course of the last few weeks?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a really good question. I think, yes, I'm aware I'm having to do that more, because I'm also aware that everyone else's emotional arousal is up a bit as well. So if everyone is in their normal place of being chilled and happy and calm, then actually they probably wouldn't even notice what's going on with me. But I think because they're in a state of their emotional arousal is a bit higher, they're also feeling anxious or stressed or whatever's going on for them, or just the fact that they, kids can't see their friends or whatever, they're in a slightly different place. And I think it's because I acknowledge that they're more sensitive to what's going on with me, and so suddenly we're all, it's all pinging off each other. And actually, yes, I think that's a really good question. I think I'm definitely more aware now.
Because I think the key that I'm taking away from that, and certainly some of my own observations, is that the intensity of the last couple of months has really, certainly for me, it's forced me into having to up my game when it comes to these kind of habits that you mentioned there a moment ago, Phil. And it's been eye-opening, kind of revelatory, but also incredibly empowering as well, to know that, hey, look, I have got the resourcefulness to access these techniques and these, to give myself that I can control this. And there's no way I'm going to be stopping that just because we're moving into this kind of next phase, and when things go back to normal, kind of 5 years down the line or whatever, I want to still be doing these things to take care of myself. And to your point there, Lisa, as well, hopefully this idea of kind of keeping that open dialogue, letting people know around you, this is how I'm feeling today, not feeling amazing, so I'm just going to be a little bit more, can keep myself to myself, or whatever it is you need to do to protect yourself, but having that dialogue going. And I think this is where we move into that. You mentioned about the change curve, Phil, this final stage of integration, where we take what we've learned and we've made meaning of it and the significance, and we've learned things really powerful about ourselves and how we respond to things. But we don't just forget all of that as we move into this next phase. We actually start to use it and, as I said, integrate it into kind of normality.
Yeah.
You know, for me, again, I think that it's not just how other people see us. So people might see me as kind of high energy, motivated, positive all of the while, and that's how I see myself as well.
Yeah.
But in some ways, that was a potential problem for me over the course of the sort of the middle phase around Easter time, because I'd come into the lockdown and I felt I was kind of in my element. I was thriving. I was doing loads of Zoom calls. I was helping people left, right, and center, putting out loads of content. I felt like I was really excelling and doing living my doing my best work essentially. And I thought, well, of course I would be, because this is who I am. This is what I do. But because of that, I didn't notice the additional challenges that I was facing. I was kind of like blinkered to it. And so kind of around Easter time, I just found myself in a bit of a dip, and it was probably a little bit of a lag there of a few days before I realized, you know, I've got to really sit up here and pay attention to some of these personal self-care practices.
Yeah.
And it was nothing kind of special, nothing radical, just taking care of things like, you know, making sure my exercise was on point. I was being active. I was taking more regular breaks. That was a really big one for me. So if I felt that kind of sense of uncertainty or anxiety, that kind of, you mentioned catastrophizing thoughts, Lisa, if that started to creep into my mind, then I'd take a break.
Yeah.
So
I think
I'm trying to push through it. I'll take a break.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting though, that because, you know, that's what people need to be doing, is taking the breaks and doing what they need to do to be their best, and knowing what those early warning signs are, you know, where some people feel that kind of tension in their chest or their shoulders, you know, hunched up, or they're getting headaches or whatever it might be. And then being able to do something about it, like take some exercise, have a break, whatever. But the number of people who still see that as a luxury, and still having so many conversations with people about, well, I can't, you know, just go for a 10-minute walk around the block to clear my head, or I can't possibly go and sit in the garden and have a cup of tea in the sunshine when it was sunny, or any of those things, because I've got too much work to do and I've got more to get into my day now. And I have to keep reminding people that if you just keep pushing, all you end up doing is just pushing your emotional arousal so high that actually your brain can't function well, and you're so unproductive that you're doing yourself a disservice. And if you leaf out of your book, George, and start to think about, okay, what are the things that I need to do in terms of how often do I need to have a break, or go outside and have some fresh air, or do exercise, or whatever it might be, to keep myself in the best position to be able to be most productive with whatever that is. But it's still something I have a conversation with a lot.
And it's interesting, isn't it? One of the things I've noticed, and Kerry and I who work together, we've noticed a lot. You know, we talk to people about being kind to yourself and having that compassionate self as well. But a lot of people put themselves under stress because they're pushing themselves all the time. And a lot of people, I think, have had this imbalance over this last 10 weeks where they've been working hard and there's been lots to do, and they've got the children to deal with, and they're trying to deal with, you know, their partner at home as well, if that's the case. They've got all these other things. And some people are just putting too much pressure on themselves. And I found this for me right at the beginning, and I said to Kerry at one stage, I need to take a few days off to look after my family. Because for me, I realized that I was working, but what I'd forgotten is my kids and my wife were at home in a different environment. Whereas for me, I'm used to doing this. This is how I work. But I realized they're at home having to deal with being at home all the time. And I was neglecting that. And for me, it struck me that I needed to be kind to myself and give myself permission to have time off, see them, and just do nothing for a while, if need be. But more importantly, focus on what they needed. And it helped me. And the flip side of that was then I realized I also needed to focus on what I needed as well. And I liken it to the typical thing when you get on a plane, they say about putting your own oxygen mask on first. I realized over this time, I needed to have my oxygen mask on. So I've started to do something differently. And George and I have talked about this a few times. And George gets up earlier than I do. But for me, I set my alarm for 6 o'clock in the morning. And I get up at 6 and I do a couple of things which are a consistent thing I try and do every day. But if I don't do it, I don't beat myself up for it. But the thing is, I get up and I just do some stretching. I go and do some Pilates or some yoga in the garden to get myself into the state in the morning. And then I sit down and I write in my journal. I actually physically write down a number of different things just to help me focus on what I need to do for the day. But I realized actually that's my time. And the key for me was about being kind to me by saying, right, I need to do these things. It just helps me get focused and get clarity. And then during the day, I can come back to my journal and say, what is it I plan to do today? What are the key things to help me manage my energy? Because I noticed I need to take time out for my wife and my children. but also I needed just to manage my own energy, just to manage those gremlins that were going on occasionally, telling me things that weren't going to be right, and saying, okay, it's all going to be okay, focus again, go back to what you know how to do. And when I do that, I can get myself in a centered space again.
Yeah, and
it's funny, isn't it, how there's that sense of kind of judgment and guilt, almost, for taking time to do something luxurious, like taking a break when you're so busy. It's the whole Stephen Covey 7th habit of sharpen the saw, right?
Yeah.
You just take a moment to sharpen the saw, then you cut that damn tree down a lot quicker. I haven't got time to sharpen the saw. I've got to chop this tree down.
I'm doing this tree down. Yeah, Lisa, you're about to say something as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, you use the word needs quite a lot, Phil, and I think it goes back to something you both talked about. And I use an emotional needs audit quite a lot when I work with people. So it's on the Human Givens Institute. They have a really good tool you can use, which is basically a check-in with how well are your emotional needs being met. And it's recognizing that, you know, we've all got these physical needs, and George, you kind of alluded to the fact that people are better at meeting those. But in terms of our looking after ourselves emotionally, and knowing that we need to do stuff that gives us a sense of control and a sense of achievement, which if you're just kind of feeling like you're running along the wrong way of a conveyor belt, then you don't feel like you're making that progress. And stuff that gives us a sense of meaning. So if we got our meaning from going to, you know, socializing or going to whatever club, we can't do that now. What do we replace that with? And I'm noticing for a lot of people, the level of anxiety is going up because they're suddenly feeling like all this, what they used to engage with in life, has been taken away from them. And so their basic emotional needs are not being met. And it's having to look at, well, you know, how can you get your need for status met differently, and not in an unhealthy way. So people who are working from home suddenly having to work twice as much to prove their worth to their employer, and all those kinds of issues that are coming up. So I think it's really important to, like you say, Phil, recognize what you need to do to meet your own emotional needs. You have to put those first before you can start to look at other people.
And one thing I wanted to segue into in that case, we talked about this phrase that you've used a few times, Lisa, when you've talked to us, is around this heightened state of emotional anxiety, and use the word emotional arousal in terms of people there. Can you just explain a bit what that means? Because I think this is going to be one of the things that's key for people now as we transition back into the workplace. And what's your take on that? What's that mean?
So the way I talk about it a lot to people is the amygdala, which is like our little, I like it, which is a security officer in our brain, whose job is to keep us safe. And at the moment, our amygdalas are tending to fire quite a lot because they're just seeing threat. They're anxious. It's the uncertainty of the future just creates a sense of risk, and therefore our amygdalas are hypervigilant because they're not sure what's going to be happening. And as soon as your amygdala, like in your, you know, when you're chilled, your security officer's having a nap in his chair, eating a biscuit, whatever, and as soon as he's getting a bit stressed, he starts jumping up and down a bit, and it causes your emotional arousal to increase. And the problem with that is that, and I almost liken it to, I mean, I tend to scribble things on pieces of paper, but I always liken it to, you know, you kind of got your brain or your head, and your emotional arousal creeps up to the point where it literally hijacks your cognitive brain up here. We call it emotional hijacking. So when your emotional arousal is too high, it stops your cognitive brain and all the cognitive functions, such as being rational, reasoning, communication, empathy, everything you need in order to be a successful human being in terms of how we measure those that success. It gets in the way of that being able to be effective. So we then end up with that kind of black and white thinking and really focused on the problems rather than be able to see any other solutions. And that sense of kind of just feeling overwhelmed, but not really being able to see where you go with it. And so for me, the priority is always about getting that emotional arousal down. And I think for me, the worrying thing as well is there's a lot of people who are experiencing, as a term, high functioning anxiety. So it's not the people who, you know, there are some people who you know struggle with anxiety, and there are some people who you might think stereotypically would struggle more with anxiety. It's not those cool as a cucumber types. You know, certainly not people like George, who is always very calm and composed and looks like, you know, he's superhuman. But actually, the reality is that anyone can and does experience anxiety, but some people are much better at masking that. So when they're very kind of appear very competent and confident. You know, our leaders, our people who are very good at speaking about all this stuff, or just leading other people, managing teams, they can't possibly experience anxiety, but actually they do. Their brains in the same sense of emotional turmoil, but they're just good at masking it.
Well, what I've noticed that have been really sort of has been really refreshing has been the number of conversations where leaders and those kind of individuals who you describe as being sort of, you know, cool as a cucumber, and you think, well, they've got it nailed, they're not going to be struggling at all, have been quite open. I know this isn't across the board, but I've seen more people than ever before willing to talk about their own personal challenges in a kind of a, not a pity me, poor me way, but a matter of fact way. Like, this is completely normal, but also in a way that they probably haven't done before.
Yeah.
Do you know, George, it's really interesting.
It's really good for teams as well. Great leadership to show that vulnerability. Phil, you put a post up on LinkedIn just the other day asking, is it appropriate to show emotions in the workplace? Of course, it depends on the situation and what impact that has on other people. But ultimately, like, no one's a robot. We all experience the whole range of emotions, from the good ones to the not so good ones. And the more we're able to talk about that, even just talking about it, the whole name it to tame it thing, right? If you're able to name it and say, well, that's interesting. This is how I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling a little worried. What's driving that? And to unpick it and unpack it through the lens of curiosity instead of judgment, then you can start really understanding it and riding it out in a more healthy and productive way, rather than becoming mired in it and struggling through it.
It's really interesting, actually. You mentioned that, and I've got this book beside me, and on my post the other day, I referenced this. And this is the book which I picked up many years ago. And the thing that drew me to this at that time, there's a quote on the back by Country Living, so what reference that is. And it says here, express your emotions at work and still be a success. And when I read that, I just thought, how can they write that? And that was taken as praise at the time. And it's really interesting, that still be a success. And when I put that LinkedIn post out, I just asked people to come back and comment on where they saw their emotions, and lots of feelings, lots of views on what emotions meant. And some people said it's feelings, and talked about those things. And a lot of people went into the negative side of emotions. I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling scared, I'm feeling anxious, and saying, in the British workplace specifically, we don't like bringing those up. And we often talk about, well, in British workplace, do we bring up the other emotions, the positive? Hey, I'm feeling really energized today. I want to go and do these things. And it's always the stereotypical salesman saying, come on, we're going to go gung-ho for this today. But actually, when you look at it, we all come to work with our emotions. We come to work with feelings. And actually, as leaders or as employees, or whichever we are, we still should be able to bring those out and say, do you know, this is how I'm feeling today, George. I'm feeling anxious because of these things. I don't need you to do anything about it. I just want to acknowledge it, and that's what's happening. And one thing I've noticed in my coaching over the last 10 weeks, I coach a lady who's a CEO, and she's not on the call today, unfortunately, I'm going to ask her. And she and I have had lots of conversations around her levels of anxiety. And her anxiety is more about the fear for the employees she's got, and the responsibility she feels for them as individuals. But she has no one else to talk to, because she can't express this to them, because it's all about them. So she comes to me as the coach to talk about it, but at least she's talking to somebody. And I fear that a lot of people don't have anybody to talk to, and are choosing not to find someone outside their organisation to talk to. I wonder if you're noting the same in terms of your practice, Lisa, or your wellbeing, George.
Well, I was going to say, just in terms of that, I mean, it's great that she's talking to you, and I think it'd be really interesting to know what she's saying to her employees in terms of how much she does care about them. Because I think it's always that I'm really worried about my employees, but I can't say anything to them because it's about them. I'm going to have to speak to someone else. And that's really, they definitely need to speak to someone else to be able to get that support. But it's also really interesting for me to think, to ask those people, well, are you still letting the people know that you care? Because if they don't, this is a classic kind of miscommunication, or where people start interpreting things in their own way. My manager doesn't care about me because they're very busy trying to get stuff into place for us to be a success, but they're not really, I don't even know how they feel about me as an individual, because the managers or the leaders aren't sharing that because they're talking to other people. So I think it's got to be both ways. And I think there's so much research that shows that CEOs and leaders think that empathy in their workplace is great and people are really checking in with each other and people are feeling very careful, but then actually when you ask the employees, most research shows that most employees don't think that.
Yeah.
So it's a real mismatch.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really interesting point, that you've got to go both ways.
Yeah. And interesting, before I go back to George, what she's done specifically, she's reached out to, over a period of time, she's tried to reach out to each of the managers in the business and the employees, just to check in with them how they're feeling and having conversations with them personally. And she's a great one for sending thank you cards to her staff. And she's done that to every one of the staff, as far as I know, to say thank you for your help during this period of time. I know it's difficult, we'll get through this. It's really made a difference. The conversation I'm hearing is that it's actually really helping her.
Brilliant.
So yeah, George, you're gonna raise hand there as well.
Was I? Actually, on a kind of a semi-related point. Hey, we're just fireside chatting. It goes anyway, right?
We can talk about anything.
Something that I've kind of observed, which is a bit kind of, I said, semi-related to what Lisa was saying there about this mismatch, and that's an acknowledgement that people are approaching and dealing with this in a different way, and in particular now, we've kind of framed this whole chat around the idea that we're moving out of the lockdown, and I was trying to work out what the opposite of that is. It wouldn't be a lock up, would it? So kind of an unlock down. Who knows? But anyway, we're changing. So we've had this real kind of crappy time where there's lots of restrictions in place, but also a great deal of certainty in terms of our day to day. Like, you can't do anything, stay at home, don't go anywhere, don't see anybody. So it's been kind of easy in terms of figuring out what we need to do on some levels. Whereas now, some schools are going back. Some people are going back to work, which is why one of the big drivers for doing this session. Yeah. Some businesses will be reopening, some won't. How will social distancing work? Will there be another spike? There's a lot more uncertainty now, I think, which has perhaps been fueling this heightened state of anxiety, which has also then been having this knock-on effect of little things that previously would have just gone over your head, fine, whatever, are now triggering us and creating greater stress, frustration, and kind of manifesting as anger, and the people around us are getting the fallout for that. But what I'm noticing, and certainly through some of the conversations I've had, is that actually there are different camps with this. Some people are quite, let's get back into it, let's go, and everything's going to be fine. And some people are much more reluctant to put themselves in harm's way, as they may see it, with regards, mixing with other people, touching things when they haven't got PPE, and so there's this a difference of opinion. And if you're working in an organization and they're saying everyone's got to do it this way, that's the leadership's decision, but you're of the opinion that actually it's not safe yet, then that's going to create anxiety. Or maybe the other way, if you've got a very cautious leadership team and they're saying, well, it's going to hold back for a little while, bit longer working from home, and you're now, come on, let's just go into it ready. Again, there can be things are happening too slowly for you, which can also be frustrating and stress causing. And so I think having that appreciation and understanding of different viewpoints, the empathy of how people will see things differently, I think that's something that we need to really take into consideration as we go forwards, instead of being quick to judge, quick to maybe accuse is too strong a word, but tell people what they should be doing or how they should be feeling and thinking, whereas how we think and feel is fine for us, but it's not going to be correct to do that.
Yeah. And Julia, that's a really good point. I think I'm noticing, and Kerry and I have done a lot of work around this, and Kerry is just
have I frozen there?
You did freeze for a little while.
All right.
You're back again now, you're live. I was just saying that Kerry and I have done a lot of work around this, and Kerry has just produced a number of documents and training programs actually to help people manage that re-entry to the workforce, to help people get back into things again. And interesting, Alison just put a note down saying, actually, maybe it's called an ease down rather than lockdown. We'll see what happens. But I think this thing around whatever we want to call it is going back into this next stage and recognizing the emotions that everyone holds. And you're right. Whether the leaders are too slow to react or the employees are trying to be cautious about it, actually, we just need to recognize and acknowledge it and be open to say, okay, look, what's going on for you? And if you don't want to come back into the office at this moment, let's just explore what it is for you, because I think there's a lot of individual psychological contracting that needs to go on to make sure that we just check in with each person. And different people have different anxieties. And just because I feel one way doesn't mean you feel that way. And I think that's the thing about recognizing the emotional levels and just allowing that conversation to happen so that people feel comfortable and confident that they can come back. My safety has been looked after physically, the distance is in place, but also my mental safety can be looked after as well.
I was doing a webinar with another colleague yesterday on the conversations around re-engaging people back in the workplace, and it was quite interesting having the focus on for people to be able to talk about the conversation. So rather than, you've got to be thinking about 20 different things, it's actually just get your conversation right, get your communication with your employees right. So checking in authentically because you really care. Not, I've seen various materials going around, like tools saying these are the questions, these are things you need to be asking your employees. It's almost worded, and it's kind of almost put across as you just go down these questions and almost tick them off, and once you've done it, and that's great. And yes, they were emphasizing you can't, it's got to be authentic, it's got to be a conversation that you're having because you genuinely care about people, and you've got to have it regularly, because if you ask me how I'm feeling today, I could answer all your questions. Ask me 2 days time how I'm feeling, it's probably completely different. Actually, it will be because it's Saturday. but it's that sense of it's okay to expect your responses to go up and down. So you have to keep checking in. It might just be a text message or a quick phone call. Forget the video calls because everyone's a bit fed up of staring at a screen now. So, you can have a phone call while you're walking or whatever it might be. But just that sense of, how's it going today? Are you still worried about such and such? Or are you still feeling okay about such and such? Because it's only when people are experiencing the reality for them in the workplace or wherever the challenges are working from home that they suddenly think, oh, this isn't actually working so well anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. That even I recognize it. I was going through this emotional roller coaster at the beginning. And actually now we're all doing the same thing, and it's daily, it's hourly that people can have differences of feelings. I deal with a lot of people who work in car dealerships at the moment. It happens to be one of my big clients. And so they're reopening up the showrooms. So they've got an issue there where they've got customers coming in and you've got executives sales executives doing the work. So they've had to set up their systems. We've also then got receptionists dealing with the customers coming in. So there's lots of anxieties that everybody is facing at different times. And for the first few days, actually, they need to spend time just saying, okay, how do we get used to this new workplace? Because they've had to reconfigure the whole building to fit people in there. And I think there's a lot of companies going to have to do the same over the next few weeks and months, just to reconfigure the workplace. And it's going to feel like a very different place to be. And people need to recognize that. And therefore, it's like almost going back to work on the first day. I felt very nervous on my first days in companies. And actually people are going back after a 10-week holiday. It's going to be very tough for people.
I think it's almost about managing expectations, isn't it? Like, if you go back thinking, well, we're going to go back be just like normal again. We'll figure it out. Then that can cause more stress. Whereas if you say, well, look, we're going to give ourselves this transition period of a few days or even a week or so to just figure it out. Suck it and see what works, because we don't have all of the answers. We can make our best guesses as to what the best way forwards will be in terms of re-engaging and getting back into the workplace. But actually, we need to have some on-the-ground experience to then tweak and change things. I think taking the pressure off ourselves to kind of be perfect straight out of the gate is again another way of just reducing that anxiety, because it takes we'll be okay, we'll figure it out. You can't control everything. To your point earlier, Lisa, you can't control everything around you, but you can start to influence your response to it by demonstrating that self-compassion, that lack of judgment, and that trust in yourself and those around you, that actually you can figure it out. You are resourceful enough to figure it out. And I think when you take that pressure off and that anxiety drops, then actually your performance goes up anyway. So you're more likely to get to the best solution at the end of the day anyway.
Yeah. And actually, that goes to my point that I often think about. A lot of companies are trying to go back to the new normal. That's been a phrase that's going around. Someone this morning on my breakfast meeting said, actually, it's going to be a fresh start. And there's a lot of differences. And from that perspective, I think people have got to be aware of productivity levels. You know, where people are working 8 hours a day, it comes back to Lisa's point earlier. We've got to allow people to take breaks and take mental breaks from what they're doing as well. And that check-in. So we're not, you know, if we're in the office for 8 hours a day, actually, how many hours of productive work are we likely to get from people? And how do we manage the expectation of the amount of output we're going to be getting from the business? Yes, we're all behind on revenues, and people might have issues around it. We've got to drive budgets, got to fight to get back where we were again. Actually, no, we've got to understand how the employees become better engaged. And it goes to my point again. Actually, I work on culture and commercial. Let's get the culture right. Let's help people really feel safe. And ultimately, you'll drive the commercial returns. But you've got to get the people connected back to the business, re-engaged and feeling that they're part of something again in a safe environment before they go on.
And I think that connection with the business is almost that connection with the team as well, isn't it? Because, you know, we've had lots of conversations today about kind of checking in with individuals, but actually as a team, how well are people joining back together, and how well are they understanding what's gone on for each other? Are there resentments about different circumstances? You know, we're talking a lot about self-awareness, about checking with how we're feeling and being aware of others people in terms of different perspectives. But that all requires a degree of emotional intelligence, which, you know, going back to Daniel Goleman, which actually some people aren't so great at in terms of being aware of their emotions and other people's emotions. And they, you know, having opportunities to talk with someone outside and to talk with someone else to say, actually, I'm really struggling with this, or that person's struggling with that. And having those conversations where we can say, well, actually, maybe people need to have support to understand that different people have different perspectives. My way is not the only way. And although we know that, there are a surprising number of people who don't appreciate that.
Really good point. Really good point. And I think there's something around there about you know, having that ability to co-create solutions with people, and in doing so, checking in that everybody's got the common understanding. And you're right. There's less empathetic people out there, and there's more empathetic people. I've, as an engineer, I've worked with a lot of very thinking people who are very data-driven, and actually they don't know about emotions some of the time. They don't bring them to work, but they've still got emotions behind the scenes. So we need to understand that both ends of the spectrum and understand what can we do to support all sides of society. Now, look, we could talk about this for a long time. We always said that 45 minutes would never do this justice in terms of conversation. So we're going to need to wrap up at some stage today, and it's 11:15 now. So I'm feeling now might be a good time to try and bring this to a conclusion, if possible. So I wonder, what final points would we give people if we had to think of one thing that would say, this is the key thing that we would take forward? There may be many others. What's the key thing? What advice would you give people to work on, and where can they find out more information if they need to?
So I'll go then, because George and I both look at each other. For me, I would say, look up, get yourself right, because if you're in a good place, then you can be in a really good place to look after those around you, whether they're colleagues or family or whoever. And the two things I would I must say, two kind of come under one umbrella. You said I'd say one. So something called 7-11 breathing, which is so some people will be aware of breathing techniques to reduce emotional arousal, reduce anxiety, and so on, stress. But if we know that if we breathe out for longer than we breathe in, it triggers our parasympathetic nervous system, which basically makes us relax. So I would always say, just take time to focus on your breathing and breathe out for longer. Doesn't matter if you don't do 7-11. And also mindfulness, and that's we haven't discussed that at all today. That's a whole another 45 minutes. But in essence, stopping your brain from worrying about stuff that's gone on in the past, or busy planning and predicting the uncertainty, or worrying about the uncertainty of the future, just by focusing your brain on the here and now. It's just not about, it was a real fad at one point. People thought it was like, oh, it's this all hippie stuff and you have to empty your brain and all the rest of it. Nonsense. There's a load of, if you look at neuroscience and stuff, there's all the research there that shows that we can calm our brain and just help it focus on the here and now. And in essence, use your 5 senses to be aware of the here and now, what you're feeling, what you can hear, what you can see, what you can smell, and so on. And I think that really brings down, those two things in conjunction with each other are really, really effective at bringing down emotional arousal.
Yeah, lovely thought. Thanks, Lisa. That's really, really good. And I really take that back. Yeah, mindfulness, we could talk about that. And it's something that actually hasn't been talked about at all in the last 45 minutes, but actually could be a whole subject as well, because actually it's key to one of the things going forward. And so great points. Thank you. What about you, George? What would be your takeaway or your giveaway from this for people to pick up?
I think one of the points that we have made today is how important it is to check in with yourself and to say, well, look, this is how I'm feeling today. Because Lisa, you made the point that it's important to share how you're feeling with the people who are around you, but actually just sometimes just acknowledging it to yourself is enough, is a starting point to say, actually, you know what, today I'm feeling a little wobbly. I'm not feeling brilliant. I'm a bit struggling, and it doesn't matter. I'll be okay, but I just need to protect myself and maybe take it a little bit steadier today, and just be aware that I'm probably going to be triggered by more things or more easily. And so that regular practice of checking in with yourself, the 1 to 10 scale, 1 is really struggling, 10 is thriving and feeling absolutely fantastic mentally and physically and emotionally and everything else. And then where are you on that scale? Maybe even multiple times through the day, because it can change so quickly. And then that gets you into a state where you have the opportunity, almost getting upstream of the problem before it gets to that problem state. You're able to manage it in advance, so you're able to, as I said, kind of protect yourself from more of the triggers and more of the stressors that can take you over that limit, where then at least you have got things like the breath work and mindfulness practices to bring you back online again. But the more we can avoid that, the better.
And I love that. And the phrase that comes to mind when you're saying that is the phrase I use is that awareness is the greatest agent for change. Once you're aware of what's going on for you, and I really take your 1 to 10 scale, which is a really easy way of doing it, just recognizing that for yourself, and then you can do something about it ahead of it happening, so you'll be aware of what's going on. Interesting, actually. I was thinking as I asked the question to you, what would be my one takeaway? And I think for me, I come back to my little black book, my journal. I'm a big one for this, and George knows this well. And I think for me, it's about, I write down here something from the 5-minute journal, which is 3 things I'm grateful for every day. Just because it helps me reflect on where I am, what I need to be doing, and just going internal about that. And George and I have talked recently about a book called The Daily Stoic, which is a great quote each day for something to consider. It just helps me focus on that. So I read that quote, and then I look at my journal and write down the 3 things I'm grateful for. And the quote that came out yesterday was taking Plato's view. And I'd never come across this before. But Plato, apparently, he looked at things and said, when you take a perspective on anything and go above it, it actually becomes much more insignificant. So for me, I try and look at it and say, okay, this is just a blip. What's happening now will pass. We will be all right in the end. And if you keep that mindset, if you come above it, actually, where are we? We're just in a blip in our lives, and we'll look back on it. I listened the other day to an interview with Tim Ferriss and Kevin Hart, and Kevin Hart said something that was really clear. He said, people talk about great moments in history, and one day, people will look back on this and say, this was a changing point. So what do we do about it? Because if we can get that perspective on it and understand how we go in the workplace, taking that mindset, actually we can do a lot of good because of it. So I take Plato's view and I write my 3 journaling points and then see what comes up for me each day. Before we finish that case, where can people find out a bit more? Obviously, we're all running business, we're all here to help. I'd love to do more of these webinars. George, just a quick plug for yourself in terms of where you are, where you're at, how people get in touch.
Well, my website, bygeorgeanderson.com, or find me on LinkedIn, where actually LinkedIn's probably the best place just because I post a lot more content pretty much every day on LinkedIn. But yeah, I'd love to connect with anybody who watches this and wants to find out more.
Okay, thanks, George. And Lisa, for you as well?
Yeah, same. My website is timeforchange.co.uk or on LinkedIn. That'd be great. I'd like to connect.
Perfect. Well, I hope it's been useful for everybody. We will be running another one of these. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great conversation. Hopefully you've all got a lot out of it. Thank you for your comments in the chat box. Sorry I haven't responded to all of them, but I'm hoping this has been useful. If you did find it useful, drop me a note and say so. Just give us more information. And also just let us know other things you might want to talk about in the future. And I think we've got lots of conversational pieces here, which would be really useful. So thank you for joining us, and goodbye, keep going, and be safe.
Thank you.